Today I'm going to go over the top 5 most overrated book from my brain. That means the books that I went into, the books that have certain reputations, that I came out the other end thinking I was actually quite disappointed. Now, the way I measure this in my own brain is the difference between what I expected and what I actually got, what I thought of the book. So the whole point of this video is that you're probably going to disagree with me, because these are the books that I think the fan base like that I don't. I'm doing this because I did the underrated top 5, so of course logically I've got to do the overrated top 5. So if you come to the end of this video and you think, oh, I'm going to show him why this book is brilliant, I get it. These aren't going to be popular opinions, but this is what I think. Now, with that massive, probably unnecessary disclaimer out of the way, let's get into the top 5 most overrated books from my perspective of the Animorphs series. And at number 5, it is number 17, The Underground, the one where they morph bats. It's the one with the bat on the cover, and they have to put oatmeal into the yerk pool. Now, I will say before I start, it was actually quite difficult to do the list for this one. The last one was difficult for a different reason. So the most underrated books, I had quite a big short list of books that I could have put in that top 5, and some didn't make it. This one, it was more of a struggle. There were 2 definites, and the others were like, how many of these books are actually overrated? How many of these books have a popular reputation amongst the fan base that don't deserve it? Really not that many, in my opinion. So this book, I wouldn't say is the most popular amongst the Animorphs community, but I certainly think it's more popular than I think it deserves. Not by too much, though. This one I gave a 3 out of 10 when I did the original reviews. And it's bang in the middle of the Applegate writing period, which ended at like 23. So it was still when Catherine was writing these books, and it was just such a dip in quality compared to all the others. Everything was sort of middling around 7, 8s and 9s, and then bang, this one, and then back up again. Yeah, I don't know what was going on in Catherine's mind when this was... I think she was high on something, because the plot is just weird. It tries to be funny where it really ought not try to be funny. And a lot of it just seems pointless. It very much is a filler book, and nothing's ever really done with the oatmeal plotline after this. I think the whole biological weapons thing could have been done a lot better, with a lot more seriousness to it. I just think it was really underwhelming, this one. This is why it's number 5 on my list. Number 4. I thought this one had a very good reputation amongst the fan base, and so when I eventually came up to it, I was disappointed. It's book number 29, The Sickness, the one with Cassie morphing the yerk on the front. I came into this book thinking, oh, this is going to be great. This is going to be one of the better ghost-written books. Frankly, I was disappointed. The plot was ridiculous. And I know that there are a lot of ridiculous plots in Animorphs, but a lot of them work in the context of themselves, take them at face value, but this one isn't even self-consistent. It just made no sense. It talks about Axe getting ill because there was an infection in his tree gland, which is an Anderlecht gland in the brain. And then the Animorphs, who, by the way, are humans, start to get ill with it. It's just like, that makes no sense. And then Cassie became a brain surgeon at the end, which only really works if one of my current theories is true, that she's an interdimensional loper spawned by the Elemist. But that aside, it doesn't make sense. It's just underwhelming, and yeah, a bit more so than The Underground. It's number 4 on my list. When you talk to fans of the series and ask, where does the series climax begin? They'll tend to say 45 onwards. Book 45, which is this one, The Revelation, Markamorph and the Ant. They'll say the ghostwriter phase from like 24 up to 44 is where it's a lot of filler, not much happens. 45 onwards is where we get back into the real swing of things. I frankly don't agree with that, and I will do a video at some point just talking about the ghostwriter era and summing that up at some point, but I expected to come into this thinking, right, we're going to get really back on track with the main plot. Yeah, it did, but in the most ham-fisted, poorly executed way. I thought this was a really poor book, considering what we're in store for, considering the stakes and the movements that we make in this. I just think it pulled it off really badly. It was a poor book, in my opinion. The fact that we skipped over Marco revealing to his dad about the Yerk invasion seemed really cheap to me. The Deus Ex Machina in the Yerk pool, where Jake manages to hide a bug fighter in amongst the buildings of the pool, just bizarre and crap, honestly. Yeah, it was a real letdown. Thankfully, the books that came after it improved markedly, but this was a real disappointment considering what I expected. Now we come to the top 2 books. Now these were the easy ones. These were the ones that, as soon as I thought overrated books, these 2 were straight in there, no questions. These 2 are always going to be in this list and probably always going to be top 2. And if you're a fan of this channel and you've watched for a while, you know what's coming. You know which 2 books are going to be in this list. They are 2 books that the fans seem to really like, without fail, including young Pebble over there, my wonderful assistant. You love these books and I'm going to rip it to shreds. Not literally. I'm not going to do a weakness, although I will mention the weakness at some point. Number 2. Now, those of you who know which books are going to be here, it's more a question of what order am I going to put them in. Number 2 is book 33, The Illusion. This one was awful. An awful book that a lot of fans really like, especially the Tobias fans. Fair enough, Tobias fans, you might really like this book, but the book basically revolves around a really crappy new villain who I just want to erase from my memory. She's an awful villain. Plot holes at the start, just weird shenanigans going on that made no sense. For instance, trying to break into this community centre, sneaking around the back, and Axe is just in there, just standing around. Really bad. And then half the book is just Tobias being tortured. Well, we learn nothing really new. We just rehash stuff that we already knew and tortured Tobias in the meantime. Yeah, I don't know why it's got the reputation it has. It really is a poor book relative to other Animorphs books.
Like when Tobias is emo.
People like when Tobias is emo. Yeah, pretty much. I think it'd be interesting to see people who aren't Tobias fans, how they rate this book. Yeah? Have you? When did you read this one?
Ages ago, but it was a meh.
It was a meh to you. Okay, yeah, so...
It kind of got old and repetitive.
Got old and repetitive. Yeah, I don't like this book. A lot of people do. Hence why it is in my overrated books list at number 2. And number 1, you probably know what's coming if you know me. It's the Anderlecht Chronicles. Okay, you're going to spit at me in a minute, aren't you? This book... I remember when I, at the moment I'm doing a knockout competition on the channel. Go to the communities tab if you want to vote in that. But I did one of those 5 or 6 years ago on Facebook. I used straw poll and I posted it on Facebook and what have you.
My dear,
Yeah?
your mouth is sad.
Your mouth is sad? Why?
Not good.
It's not good pizza? I'm sorry, my dear. I'm sorry. But anyway, back to...
You understand.
And from that tangent, we head back to the Anderlecht Chronicles. Thank you, my dear. My lovely assistant. Keeping me on track to finish this video at some point. Love you. Cringe. Where was I? You're doing this on purpose because you don't want me to talk bad about this book, isn't it? That's
You're wrong.
That's what this is all about. Okay, so when I did those polls about 5-6 years ago, this one won. It got through all the head-to-heads and... I think it at least got to like the final. And this is one of the most popular books in the series. And I don't think there's going to be anybody doubting that this is up there with the majority of fans as one of their favourite books in the series. It's split into 3 parts. The first part I quite liked. I didn't like Lauren, and that continued throughout the other parts. She just seemed a bit... didn't feel real. But the book ruined Chapman. What we knew of Chapman before this was this guy who sacrificed himself for the life of his daughter. This book just shits all over him. And now he's just a run-of-the-mill, typical stereotype baddie. You know, like the little runty baddie in all those films. What's that Harry Potter character? The rat one.
Wormtail?
Wormtail. He's a bit like that. He's that sort of character. Sort of this weaselly little villain running around. That's what this book turns him into, and that carries on for the rest of the series. But it started here, and I can't really forgive the book for that. The second third of this, Allerand's Choice, was awful. Absolutely awful. It was a B Hollywood movie translated into about 100 pages of children's sci-fi. It wasn't very good. It was all thrills, all spills, but no substance. And I didn't like it. That's me. I was talking to Raptor the other day, and he said, I know what you look for in books now. It's mostly character, the subtle stuff. Which is true. Which is exactly the opposite of part 2 of this. Part 3 brought it back a little bit, but was still very disappointing. But there is one thing about this book that is utterly unforgivable, in my opinion. Consider this, right? The Weakness, book 37, what I consider to be the worst book of the series, and a lot of other fans probably do as well. It truly is a bad book. That one at least followed its own plot. It set up something and it acted upon that. Badly, but at least it kept itself consistent. This book, on the other hand, didn't. At the end of part 2, Allerand's Choice, they go out into space and there's the dome ship in front of them being attacked by living asteroids and bug fighters. And that's where that book ends. The book ends with one of these living asteroids grappling onto the where ship Alfangor was on. Grabs onto that ship and Visser 3 is there. Haha, cackle, cackle. Part 3 starts. All of that is gone, and they're falling into a black hole. That is... not even the worst Animorphs fan fiction does something that bad. The Weakness didn't do anything near as bad as that. How does that get published? It can't. Surely an editor looks at that and says, you can't do that. You've just completely changed the plot. It's like if I'm writing a story and I've got Harold in his room and a robber comes in with a gun and points at his head and says, get a piece of this, Harold, you bugger. Scene cut. Start of the next chapter. And suddenly, Harold is there and there's a clown pointing one of those car horns in his face. And then just gives him a piece of cake.
Cake?
Cake, yes, cake, not pizza.
Cake. Making cake?
We will be making cake at some point soon, my dear. But you just think, hold on a minute, that's not what was happening. How has this happened? That's what happens in this book. And yet this is regarded as one of the fans' favourites. It shouldn't have been published.
Why? It's a beautiful book.
Maybe it should have been published, but an editor should have stepped in and said, you've got to write that first bit again, because it doesn't make sense. You've just completely changed it. But that is the most egregious part of this book. You're raging over there, aren't you? But everything else about this book is disappointing. There are some good moments, I'll give it that. But considering how liked it is by the fan base, this is definitely top of my overrated books list. Write your comments down below and tell me how wrong I am. And write your own lists as well, if you are so inclined. Thank you very much for watching this. I hope some of you agree with me. I know you don't. Yeah, if some of you agree with me, tell me. Tell me if I'm right, tell me if I'm wrong, tell me where you disagree or where you agree. Let's have a good conversation about this. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next time. Ta-ra!